Before we dive into today's powerful story about prejudice, dignity, and unexpected redemption, we want to thank you for being here. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul. The sun blazed down on the dusty train station of Willowridge, a quiet farming town nestled between golden fields and cautious traditions. As the steam from the arriving train hissed into the summer air, a woman stepped down from the carriage, her gloved hands clutching a modest trunk. Her name was Naomi Ellis, and every piece of her journey, 3 weeks by rail, 6 months of carefully written letters, and a heart full of hope, had led her to this very moment. Naomi adjusted the elegant straw hat she had chosen for the occasion. It wasn't flashy, but it made her feel like someone who belonged. She looked around, scanning the platform until her eyes landed on a man holding a bouquet of lilies, her favorite. His name was Walter Grayson, a 45-year-old widower and local store owner, just as he'd described in his letters. He looked exactly like the photograph he'd sent her. But the moment his eyes met hers, Naomi saw something shift. Walter's face turned pale, as if the color had been drained by shock. His lips parted, but no words came. "You're Naomi Ellis?" he asked, voice tight, unsure. Naomi smiled softly, extending her hand. "I am. You must be Walter." Walter took a step back. This isn't going to work. You didn't say you were. That you were." Naomi finished the sentence for him, her voice quiet but steady. "That I'm black?" Walter swallowed hard, shifting awkwardly as a few bystanders began to glance their way. "In your letters, you wrote beautifully. I imagined someone else. You could have warned me." Naomi's smile faded. "Tell you what exactly? That my skin is dark but my heart feels just like yours? You never asked, and I never thought I needed to explain something that shouldn't matter." Walter looked around, his discomfort growing. He clutched the wilting bouquet tighter, sweat blooming under his collar. The people here. My store, you have to understand my position. I'll cover your return ticket. You seem educated, you'll understand." Naomi's breath hitched, but she kept her head high. "I spent every cent I had to get here. I don't have a return ticket. Walter, there's nothing for me back in Chicago. No family, no job, just the promise of something new, of someone honest." Walter dug into his coat and pulled out some bills. "Here, this should cover a room in town for a few days." Just then, a low voice cut through the thick tension. "Is that your solution, Walter? Toss cash at her and walk away like you always do?" Walter turned sharply. So did Naomi. A tall man stepped out of the shadow of the station's awning. He wore a clean white shirt tucked into tailored denim and boots that had seen real work. His broad shoulders and sun-weathered skin hinted at long days in the fields. But there was nothing simple about his presence. "I don't believe we've met," the man said, turning to Naomi. "I'm Colton Bishop. I own the Bishop Acres just west of here." Naomi stiffened. She had learned long ago to be wary of strange men offering kindness. Too many of them came with strings. But this man didn't leer. He looked straight into her eyes. And his voice, though firm, held no condescension. "If I may, Miss Ellis," Colton continued, "I'd like to offer you a place to stay. My home has extra rooms, and my housekeeper loves having someone new to fuss over. You shouldn't have to figure things out alone in a town that clearly isn't ready for you." Walter's eyes widened in disbelief. "Colton, are you serious? You can't just, people will talk. They'll say things." Colton's expression didn't waver. "Let them. The same people who buy my grain and lease my land. I'd love to hear what they say when they need another extension on their feed bill." Walter paled. Everyone in Willowridge knew Colton Bishop wasn't just another farmer. He was the farmer. His land stretched farther than any man's pride in town, and his opinion often swayed more than just crop prices. Naomi hesitated, pride warring with practicality. She didn't want to owe anyone. Not again. But the reality was cruel. Walter had made sure she was alone in a strange town. And Colton was offering shelter, not pity. She gave a small nod. "Thank you, Mr. Bishop. I appreciate the offer." As Colton led her away from the platform, Walter stood motionless, bouquet dangling at his side. What none of them knew then, not Walter, not even Colton, was that Naomi carried with her more than just a trunk of belongings. hidden in a false bottom, beneath her carefully folded dresses and worn notebooks, was a set of documents passed down from her grandfather. Deeds, letters, and maps. Evidence of something that could upend Willowridge as they knew it. Back at the Bishop estate, Naomi's eyes widened as the carriage passed through wrought iron gates into a sprawling property. This wasn't a simple farmhouse. It was a grand Victorian with wraparound porches, stables, and fields that glowed gold under the late afternoon sun. Colton helped her down from the carriage and gestured toward the house. "Don't let the size fool you. It's quieter than it looks. My folks built it up years ago, but I live mostly alone. Except for my housekeeper, Mrs. Mabel. She's probably already baking something." True to his word, a round, no-nonsense woman with a warm smile greeted them at the door. "You must be Miss Ellis. Come on in, child, we'll get you settled." Naomi followed her through the high-ceilinged halls adorned with faded family portraits and furniture that looked older than she was. "I've put you in the garden room," Mabel said, pushing open a door to a bright space filled with sunlight and the scent of roses from the window box. "It's got the best view and the softest pillows." Dinner that evening was served in a long, oak-paneled dining room, but the conversation was intimate. Colton poured Naomi a glass of sweet tea. "So, what brings you to Willowridge, if you don't mind me asking?" Naomi hesitated. "I was a schoolteacher in Chicago. Budget cuts closed my school. I thought a change of scenery, and maybe companionship, might be the answer. So, I responded to Walter's ad." Colton winced. "I'm sorry for how that turned out." Naomi gave a tired smile. "It's nothing I haven't seen before. What you probably haven't seen is what's buried in that library of mine." Colton replied, his voice turning curious. "My grandfather kept everything. Land maps, property records, letters from the 1800s. Useless to most, but you might find it interesting." Being a teacher, Naomi sipped her tea. "I just might." That night, after the dishes were cleared and the house had quieted, Naomi opened her trunk and pulled out the hidden folder wrapped in linen. She had lied only slightly to Colton. She had been a teacher, but she had come to Willowridge not just for companionship, but for justice, for a story buried beneath fields and silence. And she wasn't leaving until it was told. The morning sun poured through the lace curtains of the garden room, bathing the hardwood floor in light. Naomi Ellis sat at a small writing desk, sipping coffee and staring at the open folder before her. The documents she'd carried from Chicago were old, some dated back to the Reconstruction era. Her grandfather, a quiet man who had worked as a butler in a prominent Southern home, had spent decades collecting them, and now, those yellowed pages rested in her hands like the fragile bones of a long-buried truth. She didn't have every piece yet, but she had enough to know something was wrong with the way Willowridge remembered its past. Enough to know that the land so many claimed as theirs had, at some point, belonged to someone else, someone black, someone forgotten. That someone, Naomi believed, was Josiah Freeman, her great-grandfather. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said. The door opened slowly, revealing Colton Bishop with a polite smile and 2 plates of breakfast. "I figured you could use some company. Mabel made too many biscuits." As usual, Naomi laughed softly and set the documents aside. "You two really are determined to spoil me." Colton handed her a plate and sat in the chair across from her. "I figure a little kindness never hurt anyone." They ate in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "You looked deep in thought earlier. Mind if I ask what you were reading?" Naomi hesitated. The instinct to protect what she had was strong. But something about Colton felt different. Maybe it was his quiet steadiness, or the way he looked at her without expectation or judgment. "Family records," she said finally. "Old ones. My grandfather kept them. I'm trying to piece together something important." Colton nodded, not pressing for more. "If you ever need help, or if there's anything in the Bishop archives you want to look at, you're welcome to it." "I appreciate that." Downstairs, Mabel's humming floated through the hallway, and Naomi felt, for the first time since stepping off that train, a small flicker of peace. But it was short-lived. By mid-morning, news had spread like wildfire. The black woman from Chicago hadn't left town. In fact, she was living in the home of the most powerful landowner in Willowridge. The whispers came from every corner: the bakery, The post office, the church steps, and none of them were kind. That afternoon, as Naomi sat reading on the porch, she noticed a familiar figure approaching the front gate. His stride was slow, but purposeful. Walter Grayson. He was dressed in his usual brown slacks and tan vest, hat in hand, his expression unreadable. Naomi stood. "Mr. Grayson," she greeted, cool and measured. He cleared his throat. "Miss Ellis, I was hoping we could speak." Colton stepped out from behind the screen door, arms crossed. "Anything you have to say, you can say in front of me." Walter hesitated. "I mean no disrespect. I just wanted to apologize." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Apologize for what? For humiliating me in front of a crowd? For offering me money to disappear? Or for assuming someone like me couldn't possibly be what you'd imagined?" Walter looked down. "All of it, I suppose." Colton didn't flinch. Funny how shame shows up only when it's inconvenient. Naomi took a breath. "Why now, Walter?" "Because people are talking," he admitted. "The church committee, the business guild, they're all asking questions. About why you're here, why Colton is helping you." "So you're not here for me," Naomi said flatly. "You're here to protect your reputation." Walter shifted. "No, Naomi raised a hand. "It's fine. I don't expect much anymore. But I do hope, one day, you'll understand what it felt like to stand on that platform and be reduced to a color." Walter swallowed hard, then nodded. "I'm sorry, truly." Without another word, he turned and walked back down the gravel path, his shoulders heavy. As the gate clicked shut behind him, Naomi sat down again, her heart heavy but strangely calm. Colton leaned against the porch railing. "You handled that better than I would have." Naomi smiled faintly. Years of practice. That night, Naomi found herself unable to sleep. The documents kept calling to her. The story they hinted at refusing to rest. She lit a lamp and descended quietly to the Bishop Library, a room so vast and layered in history it could have passed for a museum. Shelves lined every wall, and a tall ladder reached up to the ceiling like a bridge to forgotten knowledge. She ran her fingers along the spines of law books and land records. Something was here. She could feel it. An hour passed. Then two. At last, tucked behind an outdated farming ledger, Naomi found a folder marked Freeman, Disputed Holdings, 1872. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were survey maps, legal transcripts, and a letter addressed to the mayor at the time. The letter detailed a formal complaint filed by Josiah Freeman, who had accused a group of local landowners, including a man named Elijah Grayson, Walter's great-grandfather, of forcibly removing him from land he had legally acquired after the Civil War. Naomi's pulse raced. It was real. It had happened. And now, she had proof. She sat back, overwhelmed, but also empowered. When she looked up, Colton was standing in the doorway, barefoot and sleepy-eyed. "I figured you'd be down here," he said, voice low. "You find what you're looking for?" Naomi nodded slowly. "More than I expected." Colton walked over and peered at the documents. "That's Elijah Grayson. That's Walter's family." "I know." He looked at her. "You planning on doing something with this?" "I am," she said simply, not out of revenge, but because truth deserves light. Colton nodded. "You won't be popular." "I've never been," Naomi replied with a soft laugh. As dawn broke over Willow Ridge, Naomi stood at the front porch again, watching the sleepy town stretch into a new day. This time, she wasn't wondering where she belonged. She knew, and soon, so would everyone else. The morning after Naomi Ellis found that journal, she sat in the kitchen of Colton Bishop's cabin with a lukewarm cup of coffee and a heart full of questions. She hadn't slept much, not after reading Walter Grayson's neat, slanted handwriting detailing plans, dreams, and regrets, some clearly not meant for anyone else's eyes. Especially one entry that chilled her. "Naomi deserves better than this town. If I can't fix what I've broken, I need to protect her from it." The words echoed through her like a warning. Protect her from what? She turned toward the window, watching Colton saddle up a horse outside. Despite the years between them and the hard edges he wore like armor, he moved with a calm grace. He was solid, dependable, but now, Naomi wondered, how much had Colton known all along? When Colton stepped into the house, shaking off the morning chill, he caught her staring at the journal on the table. "You read it?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded. Not all of it, just enough to feel like Walter's still talking to me. Colton leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Then you probably read the part where he said he failed you. I read that he tried to protect me, she said, voice low. But from what? Colton hesitated, then walked over and pulled out a chair, sitting across from her. You remember how your father's shop caught fire when you were little? Naomi blinked. Of course. I remember my mother crying. I remember Walter fighting the flames with nothing but a coat and a hose. Colton looked down at his hands. He wasn't just trying to save the shop. He was trying to erase something. What do you mean? He found out something that night. Something about the mayor and a land deal that would have wiped out half the black families in town, including yours. Walter tried to stop it quietly, but they pushed back. When he went public, someone torched the shop as a warning. But he never told you because he didn't want you to grow up hating this place. Naomi stared at him, stunned. He kept all of that buried, for years? Colton nodded. He took the blame for the fire to protect you. To protect everyone. And he paid the price. Naomi felt tears sting the corners of her eyes. Her father had been a hero, but also a man haunted by what he couldn't fix. All this time, she thought he'd just grown distant before his death. Now, she saw it differently. He had been carrying the weight of the entire town's silence. I need to know more, Naomi whispered. I need to know who else knew, and why they let it happen. Colton didn't answer right away. Then, with a grim expression, he said, there's one man who can tell you everything. Pastor Ellis. He was your father's closest friend, until he wasn't. Naomi's head snapped up. Pastor Ellis? He practically raised me after my father died. He did what he thought was right, Colton said gently, but he's got his own secrets too. Later that day, Naomi walked the quiet gravel road leading to the little white chapel that sat at the edge of Willow Creek. A place that once felt like sanctuary now seemed full of shadows. The trees whispered secrets as the wind rushed through their branches. She entered the chapel, her footsteps echoing in the wooden pews. Pastor Ellis stood near the altar, adjusting the arrangement of wildflowers. His once dark hair was now silver, but his posture remained upright. Proud, Naomi, he said warmly, turning. You've been on my mind. She didn't smile. I read my father's journal. The air seemed to shift. Then I suppose you've come for answers. I need the truth, she said, about the fire. About why he never told me. Pastor Ellis placed a hand on the back of a pew. Walter was a good man. Brave, but he was outnumbered. He uncovered a plan to displace dozens of families. I begged him not to go to the papers. He thought he could change their minds. Instead, they retaliated. Who was behind it? Naomi asked. The mayor, a few businessmen, and one of the Bishop family members. Not Colton, his uncle, Henry. Naomi's breath caught. Your father confronted them, Pastor Ellis continued, and that same night, the fire happened, but the sheriff never filed a full investigation. Walter made a deal to stay silent if they stopped the land grab. So he stayed silent, and carried the shame. The old pastor looked pained. He did it for you, and I honored his wishes. But I see now, that silence did more damage than truth ever could. Naomi felt the walls closing in. All the years she'd blamed herself for leaving. All the guilt she carried about abandoning her roots, when the roots themselves had been scorched long before. When Naomi stepped out of the chapel, the late afternoon sun glowed gold through the trees. She spotted Colton waiting near his truck. She walked up slowly, the wind tugging at the hem of her dress. He told me everything, she said. Colton's jaw tightened. I'm sorry you had to carry it alone for so long. She looked up at him. I'm not alone anymore, am I? No, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Not anymore. They stood there for a long moment. The town behind them, the road ahead, and somewhere in the quiet between them, Naomi felt something shift, something begin to heal. Naomi stood under the archway of the Bishop barn as the morning light filtered through the wide beams. Dust motes danced in the air, and the soft creak of the floorboards beneath her reminded her that this place was real. This life was real. Colton approached quietly, holding 2 mugs of coffee. One for him, one for her. Just like he had every morning since that first stormy night she arrived. You sleep all right? He asked. Offering the mug, she nodded, fingers curling around the warm ceramic. Better than I have in months. Their eyes lingered. No more awkward glances. No more distance. Something between them had shifted, slowly, gently, like the first break of sunlight after a long winter. They sat together on the porch swing. The silence between them no longer uncomfortable, but comforting. Naomi broke it first. "Colton, I owe you so much." "You don't owe me anything," he said, his voice low. "You've brought more life into this old house than I ever thought possible again." She smiled. "Still, I want to give back. I want to stay. Not just because I need a place, but because this place needs me. Because you." Her voice caught, but he looked at her with the calm patience he always did. "Because we need each other," she finally said. Colton's eyes softened. "Then stay. Not out of gratitude, but out of choice." She nodded, the weight of past years lifting as if shed by sunlight. Blank. Blank. Meanwhile, back at the Grayson estate, Walter sat in his study. His hand hovered over the torn photograph Naomi had left behind all those years ago, her as a child, smiling wide beside her mother. He had never been able to throw it away. His assistant entered. "Sir, the Bishop Farm has posted a notice. They're reopening their orchard for public tours. Naomi Ellis is listed as co-owner." Walter blinked. "She stayed. She's building something," the assistant added. "With Colton Bishop." Walter stared out the window. The orchard, the Bishop name, Naomi, all things he once thought beneath him, now shining with dignity and life. He quietly folded the photograph and placed it in the pocket of his blazer. 2 weeks later, the town gathered at Bishop Orchards for the reopening festival. Naomi wore a simple blue sundress, her curls pulled up in a loose bun. She stood beside Colton, greeting guests as they trickled in, laughing and handing out fresh cider. Children ran between hay bales. Families posed near the orchard fence. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It was home. And then she saw him. Walter Grayson, older, slower, but unmistakably himself, walking across the gravel path like he was stepping through time. Naomi froze. Colton noticed, placing a steadying hand on her back. "You okay?" She swallowed. "That's my grandfather." Colton's hand didn't leave her back. "You don't have to talk to him if you're not ready." "I am," she said, straightening, "but not to make peace for him. For me." She stepped forward, her heart pounding. Walter stopped a few paces away. "Naomi," he said. She didn't smile, but she didn't turn away either. "I heard about your festival," he continued. "Thought I'd see it for myself." "You didn't come to see apple trees," she said, voice calm but firm. He nodded. "You're right. I came to see what I missed." Naomi crossed her arms. "You missed a lot." "I know," Walter said. "I don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know, I was wrong. About your mother. About you." Naomi looked past him to the orchard. The barn. The children laughing in the distance. "This place raised me back up," she said quietly, "when I had nothing left." Walter followed her gaze, humbled. "You made something beautiful out of nothing." "I made something out of pain," she corrected. "But it's not pain anymore. Not here." He nodded again, and after a long pause, he reached into his pocket. He held out the folded photograph. "I kept this, all these years." Naomi hesitated, then took it. She glanced down at the faded image of herself and her mother. And finally, a small tear rolled down her cheek. "Goodbye, Walter," she said softly. He understood. This wasn't a reunion. It was closure. That night, as lanterns lit the orchard and music drifted across the fields, Naomi and Colton stood side by side beneath the stars. He handed her a glass of cider. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she replied, leaning into him. The stars above them shimmered like hope, like new beginnings. And for the first time in years, Naomi Ellis knew exactly where she belonged. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Tellinight. At Tellinight, stories remind us that healing begins with hope, and even the gentlest kindness can rewrite a destiny. Don't forget to tap the bell so you never miss a story that could brighten your day or transform your perspective. Until our next story, keep your heart open and your spirit brave.